The hollow rider of last stand. The air was dry, heavy with the scent of dust and decay. A cloud of sand rolled lazily across the deserted town, briefly obscuring the weather-beaten sign that creaked above the door of the Last Stand saloon. The letters had long since faded, leaving behind a ghost of what once was, much like everything else in this forsaken place. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the world in a twilight haze, a lone figure emerged from the rolling dust. His wide-brimmed hat cast a deep shadow over his face, and his steps were slow, deliberate. The figure's skin, or what was left of it, clung to his bones like old parchment. His eyes, empty black pits, stared ahead with a cold, unyielding gaze. He was dressed as a cowboy, or what passed for one in these parts. A frayed, crimson scarf was knotted loosely around his neck, stark against the lifeless pallor of his skin. His long coat hung from his skeletal frame, swaying with each step like a funeral shroud. A revolver rested in its holster at his side, the grip worn smooth from years of use. The spurs on his boots jingled softly with every footfall, the only sound in the deathly silence of the town. Beside him, a creature more bone than flesh slunk forward, its glowing eyes fixed on its master. The hound, if it could still be called that, was a twisted mockery of a dog, caught somewhere between man and beast. It moved with an eerie grace, its skeletal frame almost rattling with each step, and its gaze was locked on the rider as if waiting for a command. Bill stopped in front of the Last Stand saloon, staring at the building as though searching for something lost to time. He raised a bony hand, pushing the swinging doors aside. They creaked loudly in the stillness, the sound echoing unnaturally in the empty street. Inside, the saloon was a shadow of its former self. Dust coated the floor and bar, and the air was thick with the scent of mildew and rot. Broken chairs and shattered bottles lay strewn about, remnants of a time when this place had seen life. Now, only the memories of the dead lingered. Behind the barkeep, a grizzled man who had seen better days, heard the door creak open. Without looking up, he reached for a glass, his voice gruff and tired. "Evening, stranger. You look like you could use a drink. Whiskey." But as he looked up, his eyes fell on Bill, and the words died in his throat. The glass slipped from his hand, shattering on the floor. Bill stepped closer, his boots crunching on the broken glass, the hound following silently. The barkeep's face turned pale, his eyes widening in horror as he took in the sight of the rider before him. He had heard the stories, the whispered tales of a rider who wasn't among the living, a creature who hunted the night, driven by hunger and madness. But he had never believed them until now. "What are you?" the barkeep stammered, backing away slowly. His hand trembled as he reached for the shotgun under the bar. Bill's hollow eyes locked onto the barkeep, cold and unfeeling. "I'm looking for something," he said, his voice low and grating, like stones grinding together. The barkeep's heart pounded in his chest as he fumbled with the shotgun, finally pulling it free. But before he could raise it, Bill was upon him. The rider moved with unnatural speed, his skeletal hand clamping down on the barkeep's wrist with bone-crushing force. The shotgun fell to the floor with a clatter. "Please," the barkeep begged, his voice trembling as he tried to pull away. "I don't want no trouble." Bill leaned in closer, the rotting flesh on his face stretching as he spoke. "I'm not here for trouble," he rasped. "I'm looking for my family. They were here once. Maybe they still are." The barkeep's eyes darted around the room, desperate for a way out, but there was none. The rider's grip was like iron, unyielding. He tried to remember anyone who had passed through in recent months, anyone who might have looked like this creature before him. "There's been no one here for a long time," the barkeep said, his voice shaking. "No one but the dead." Bill's grip tightened, the bones in the barkeep's wrist grinding together painfully. "Think harder," he growled. Tears welled up in the barkeep's eyes as he racked his brain. Wait, there was a family," he said quickly, his voice desperate. "Months ago, maybe more. A man, his wife, and a little girl. They came through, but they didn't stay. They were heading west, towards the mountains." Bill's hand loosened slightly, and the barkeep gasped in relief. "Are they alive?" Bill asked, his voice softer now, tinged with something almost like hope. I don't know," the barkeep admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "They were in a bad way. Sick, starving. But the mountains, there's a chance they made it." "A chance?" Bill stared at the barkeep for a long moment, as if weighing his words. Finally, he released the man's wrist, letting him stumble back against the bar. The barkeep cradled his arm, wincing in pain, but he didn't dare move. "I've got to find them," Bill said, more to himself than to the barkeep. "They're all I have left." The hound moved closer, its glowing eyes fixed on Bill, waiting for his next command. Bill turned towards the door, his mind already on the road ahead. But as he reached the threshold, he paused, looking back at the terrified barkeep. "Don't follow me," Bill warned, his voice a low growl. "And don't tell anyone I was here. If you value your life, you'll forget you ever saw me." The barkeep nodded frantically, too scared to speak. Bill gave him one last look, then stepped out into the night, the hound following closely at his heels. The doors of the Last Stand saloon swung shut behind them with a loud creak, and the barkeep collapsed to the floor, his heart racing. He had come face to face with death tonight, a death that wore the face of a man who was no longer truly human. And as the sound of the rider's spurs faded into the distance, the barkeep silently prayed that he would never see that terrifying figure again. Bill emerged from the saloon, the moonlight casting long, eerie shadows across the deserted street. The town of Last Stand was as lifeless as he was, a remnant of a world long forgotten. His hollow eyes scanned the horizon, where the jagged silhouette of the mountains loomed in the distance. Somewhere out there, his family might still be alive, and the faint spark of humanity that lingered in his decaying heart pushed him forward. The hound at his side, its skeletal frame rattling with each step, sniffed the air, its glowing eyes fixed on the direction they were to take. The creature had been his companion since the early days of the plague, a constant reminder of what he had become. Part human, part beast, it was cursed to follow him, driven by the same insatiable hunger that gnawed at Bill's very soul. As they left the ghost town behind, the wind picked up, carrying with it the distant cries of the night. Bill ignored them, focusing instead on the road ahead. He had been traveling for so long, through towns and wastelands, across deserts and valleys, always searching, always hunting. But now, for the first time in years, he had a direction, a place where his family might be. The mountains were days away, and the journey would be treacherous. The world was no longer kind to the living, let alone to those like him. Bandits roamed the lands, preying on the weak and the desperate. And worse still were the creatures like him, those who had fully succumbed to the plague, mindless and ravenous, attacking anything that moved. But Bill was different. The plague had taken much from him, his flesh, his warmth, his humanity, but it had not taken his will. He was not mindless, not yet. And as long as that faint glimmer of hope remained, he would not give up. For days, they traveled, through desolate plains and twisted forests, over rocky terrain and barren fields. The hunger clawed at Bill's insides, a constant reminder of what he needed to survive. He had not fed in days, the urge to tear into living flesh gnawing at his sanity. The hound, too, grew restless, its glowing eyes scanning the surroundings for any sign of prey. But Bill forced himself to press on, ignoring the pain, the thirst, the hunger. There was no time to feed, not when he was so close. Finally, as the sun dipped low on the horizon, casting the world in shades of orange and red, they reached the foothills of the mountains. The air here was cooler, fresher, and for a brief moment, Bill felt something he hadn't in years, a sense of peace. But it was fleeting, quickly replaced by the gnawing fear that he was too late. As they ascended the mountain pass, the landscape grew more treacherous. Jagged rocks and steep cliffs made the journey slow and dangerous. The hound slipped several times, its bony limbs struggling to find purchase on the loose gravel. But Bill pushed on, driven by the faint hope that his family was still out there, somewhere in these mountains. It wasn't long before they came across the first signs of life. A small camp, abandoned, with the remnants of a fire still smoldering. Bill knelt by the fire pit, sifting through the ashes. It was recent, no more than a day or two old. His heart, if it could still be called that, quickened. They were close. The hound sniffed the air, its ears pricking up as it caught a scent. It growled softly, and Bill followed its gaze to a narrow trail leading deeper into the mountains. They moved quickly now, the anticipation growing with each step. The trail wound through the rocky landscape, leading them higher and higher until they reached a small plateau. And there, huddled by a makeshift shelter, were three figures: a man, a woman, and a small child. They were thin, gaunt from hunger, their clothes torn and dirty. The man was trying to start a fire, his hands trembling from exhaustion. The woman held the child close, her eyes hollow with fear. Bill stopped at the edge of the plateau, his breath catching in his throat. It was them. His family. They were alive. For a moment, he couldn't move, couldn't speak. The hound at his side whined softly, sensing his hesitation. The man looked up, his eyes narrowing as he spotted the figures in the shadows. "Who's there?" he called out, his voice hoarse. Bill stepped forward, his heart, or what was left of it, aching with a mixture of joy and sorrow. "It's me," he said, his voice trembling. "It's Bill." The man's face twisted in confusion, then horror as Bill stepped into the light. "No, it can't be," he whispered, stumbling back. The woman gasped, clutching the child tighter. "Stay back," she cried, her voice laced with terror. "You're one of them." "No, it's me," Bill pleaded, his voice cracking. "I'm still me. I've been looking for you. I've been searching for so long." But they didn't see Bill, the man they had once loved. All they saw was a monster, a rotting husk of what had once been human. The man grabbed a stick, brandishing it as a weapon. "Stay away from us," he shouted. "Don't come any closer." Bill froze, the realization hitting him like a blow. They were afraid of him, terrified. He had hoped that they would see him for who he was, that they would recognize him, but the plague had taken too much. He was no longer the man they had known, the man they had loved. He was something else now, something to be feared. The hound growled, sensing the rising tension. The child began to cry, the sound piercing the cold night air. "Please," Bill begged, his voice breaking. "I won't hurt you. I just want to be with you, to protect you." But the man shook his head, his eyes filled with fear and sorrow. "You're not Bill. You're not my brother. My brother is dead." The words cut deep, and Bill felt the last remnants of his humanity slipping away. He had fought so hard, held on for so long, but now, standing before the family he had searched for, he realized that he had lost everything. The plague had taken his life, his soul, and now, it had taken his family too. With a low growl, the hound stepped forward, sensing its master's despair. The man raised the stick higher, ready to strike. Bill looked at them one last time, memorizing their faces, the faces he had clung to in his darkest moments. Then, without another word, he turned and walked away, the hound following close behind. He didn't look back, couldn't bear to see the fear in their eyes again. As he descended the mountain, the last traces of hope drained from his heart. He had found his family, but in doing so, he had lost the last piece of himself. He was no longer Bill, no longer a man. He was a hollow shell, a creature of the night, doomed to wander the wastelands forever. The mountains swallowed him whole, and as the night closed in, the wind carried with it the sound of a mournful howl, echoing through the desolate land. Bill, the hollow rider, was alone once more, lost to the darkness that had claimed his soul.